Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Mephisto's Corner, a podcast where we discuss the unexplainable, the paranormal, and our morbid reality. Thank you for joining us as we add fuel to your nightmares. I'm your host, Ready to Glare, with my co-host, Jacob. Today we will be covering the death of John Lang. I'm going to stop here for a second and make a note that my voice is coming and going, so I apologize in advance if it's high-pitched here, low-pitched there, or generally just fucking cracks.
First it was my microphone last episode, and now it's your actual voice for this one, so.
We keep it fun around here.
Okay, but yeah, this is a very strange case, and it has caused conspiracies and controversies. It provides plenty of things to discuss, so hopefully we can clear things up regarding the death of this man. I myself found myself flip-flopping in terms of what my opinion was, but let's just dive right into it.
Okay, so on Wednesday, January 20th, 2016, ABC 30 reported, police say a man who had been stabbed was found inside a burning Central Fresno home. He was pronounced dead at the hospital and the neighborhood is in shock. The smoke was spotted by neighbors on Van Ness Avenue just north of Belmont around 3 in the afternoon on Wednesday, and firefighters just happened to be a few doors down on an unrelated call. Police found a man in the kitchen, unconscious and bleeding from several stab wounds. That man was later identified as John Paul Lang, a 51-year-old male resident in Fresno, California, originally from Ohio. He was a police accountability activist, and it had been said that Lang was mentally ill, though I've not found any official confirmation of a diagnosis. Many cite that he was paranoid and delusional, which could suggest delusional disorder, in which a person cannot tell what is real from what is imagined. According to the Cleveland Clinic, the main feature of this disorder is the presence of delusions, which are unshakable beliefs in something untrue. Once again, this is not an officially confirmed diagnosis, just something that has been proposed.
Yeah, we're not mental health professionals, so we're just reporting and discussing these theories. These observations have been made about John Lang because of his behavior leading up to his death and the circumstances surrounding it. It starts with Lang's suspicions about the Fresno Police Department, so we should start there to give everyone the foundations of this case.
Yeah, okay, so basically it all started when Lang uncovered a quote-unquote scam in which he stated that the Fresno Police Department was scanning license plates of cars when they were parked near local businesses. On January 13th, 2016, Lang is quoted saying, "I discovered local law enforcement had been running a license plate scanning scam where Fresno cops would scan license plates at retail store parking lots in lower-income neighborhoods. After collecting hits of violation, they would then pull the unsuspecting drivers over a few blocks away from the store location in a marked police vehicle, claiming they simply came across their vehicle through routine driving patrols. This unethical and possibly illegal activity was simply motivated by, quote-unquote, profit and unfairly targeted Fresno's poorer residents. I also discovered the Fresno Bee was sharing chat log data with Fresno law enforcement of Fresno citizens who were critical of local Fresno government and Fresno law enforcement."
Yeah, Lang was definitely not shy about sharing his opinions about the police department. He was really adamant that there was corruption and something going on, whether it be real or imagined. He would post his supposed evidence of corruption on Fresno's local news site, the Fresno Bee. As you can imagine, law enforcement was probably not very happy about this information being put online. And after this is what Lang believed to have been a catalyst for what was to come. He believed he was being harassed and spied on by law enforcement.
Yeah, he also stated that, open quote, Fresno law enforcement subsequently used the IP addresses in the chat logs provided by the Bee to track down, stalk, and harass those chat bloggers who were critical of local politics and local law enforcement. Since publicly exposing these local law enforcement activities, it's been a constant onslaught of stalking, harassment, and intimidation directed toward myself from the Fresno law enforcement. They even tried to set me up and plant false evidence in my home. I filed a request for an internal affairs investigation, and that seemed to enrage them even more. They are simply trying to destroy me by any means possible. I am in constant fear for my life. As Kevin Ariel, a Facebook pseudonym and alias of a known local cop, so eloquently posted to my Facebook page recently, first rule of Fight Club is you do not talk about Fight Club. You should know this, Mr. Lang. And then the really cringy, like, D-face, D-face, end quote.
Yeah, okay. First, I want to clarify something. It's that you cannot get a home address from an IP address directly, but you can get a general idea of the region in which someone lives. Only by court order could a police department get that information from the internet service provider. And I think it's safe to say, since Lang was posting on Facebook with his real name and seemed to be already known and harassed by the Fresno Police Department, that the resources law enforcement have, they could have easily tracked down his address. I've actually read that an individual called Jody Murray leaked Lang's identity to the police, specifically to Jared McCormick, the Sergeant Fresno County Sheriff. Lang also has a YouTube channel which is still up, so listeners can check out Lang Marine channel on YouTube of his supposed video evidence that we will get into. But first, should we talk about the Facebook posts first?
Yeah, let's do that because they contextualize what you will see in the videos. So, a day after he was quoted regarding the license plate scanning on January 14th, 2016, Lang's posts on Facebook became increasingly more paranoid and more distressed. One post reads, "Just wanted to give you guys a heads up. If anything happens to me in the next day or two, it will be a result of the Fresno PD. My neighbor and an employee at my job, Payless Brakes and Tires on Blackstone."
Yeah, and then someone commented saying, "Wow, sending prayers of protection your way. God be with you." And John Lang replied saying, "Thank you, ... I couldn't find any information on the neighbor or the employee he was referring to at Payless Brakes and Tires. So for now, I think we should just ignore that and focus on the Fresno Police Department.
On the 15th of January, he reached out to a reporter called Colin Hoggard and once again claimed his life was in danger and that the Fresno Police Department would be responsible. He again posted on Facebook to Corin saying, "Corin, you want some news? Corrupt Fresno cops are going to try and kill me this weekend, possibly tonight. This is no joke. Please follow up on my story regardless of what happens or what version the cops and Fresno B come up with. Please check out www.jodymurray.com and my YouTube site." So there we see the name Jody Murray again.
Yeah, it says tyrant of free speech, and he works at the Fresno B. How ironic. And there we see the name Jody Murray, as you said. And I followed the link, jodymurray.com, and it led me to a YouTube video entitled "Fresno Law Enforcement Tries a Second Time to Set Me Up." This one is the quote-unquote phone caper. So let's continue with the Facebook post, and then we'll get into his YouTube channel.
Okay, so on the 16th of January, he posted a video, again from his YouTube channel, on his Facebook showing the people he believed meant him harm. "If I turn up missing or dead tomorrow, remember this van. I think I seen a couple of guys sneak out of the side door and into the building when it was parked in the carport this afternoon. I've been causing the city of Fresno a lot of problems recently, which I now regret. Sign on the door said guarantee carpet cleaning, Fresno." And then there's a link to his video. The video on his YouTube channel is titled "Carpet Cleaning Van 656 Van Ness Avenue, Fresno, Today."
I actually looked that van up, and it is a real service, and the phone number on the van matches the company linked. This is via Yelp and Google.
Okay, so an interesting thing is that I was on Reddit reading about this, and a couple of people claimed that they made a Yelp page in order to validate the service, but the reality was that the service is not real, so they just made a Yelp page with that phone number so they would seem legit. Apparently, there were some reviews, but it seems like some of them have been taken down now, so I'm not sure if it's because Yelp saw this news and thought, okay, people are maybe trying to scam us or pretend that they're a business, but there is even debate on whether it is a real business or not.
Really? Okay. Yeah, I only noticed a few reviews, so I thought that was strange. But I guess since the number matched, I kind of applied it to perhaps it gives it some credibility.
Right.
Okay, so there's one more Facebook post I think that we should go over.
Yeah, so this is the last post where he asked people if they would stay at his place to protect him. Here's the post. It reads, "Anyone want to crash at my pad tonight? Must be a legal gun owner. I think the bad guys may come and get me tonight."
Yeah, and someone commented WTF, and John Lang says, "Totally serious. Any serious patriots out there? I've seen," he says, "I seen a couple of guys sneak in the vacant building next to me. I've been under some threats recently because of my activism lately. ... So obviously he's making it pretty clear that he believes he is in danger. Leading to these Facebook posts, he states he was being harassed by law enforcement for his role in police accountability activism. So if you go to his YouTube channel, he has posted many videos in which he believes there is suspicious activity going on and that he is possibly being set up. After the Facebook posts, he wrote an open letter to the Department of Justice and the FBI in which he states, "Open letter to the DOJ and the FBI. I'm fairly certain that Fresno law enforcement is trying to set me up on some type of a charge related to child pornography. I've been trying to figure out why they would send child molester George Adams Ramirez my way when I was renting the property next to me for Don Green. Also, I was at a loss as to how Fresno law enforcement was able to turn so many people against me so quickly." And he continues to say, "And with this letter, I've for certain signed my death warrant with Fresno law enforcement. Kind regards, John Lang, Fresno, California, 93728. Lang reached out to Fresno's People's Media in May of 2015 and disclosed an online diary, along with his YouTube channel, as we keep mentioning, where he cited everything, and I mean everything. There's so much there we cannot possibly cover it all. So for the sake of time, we will talk about the YouTube videos only. This is why people saw him as paranoid and delusional, because some of the videos really don't seem all too suspicious in many people's eyes. If you check out his channel, you should be your own judge.
It should be noted, too, that this all started when Lang was having trouble in his marriage in 2009. He was in emotional and financial distress when he posted about the license plate scam. In many of the YouTube videos, the word intimidation and harassment is often found in the title.
Yeah, I gotta admit, the activity as a whole can be disturbing and creepy, but other times it might be suspicious, but it might not be, depending how you see it. For example, in the video titled "Fresno Law Enforcement Tries a Second Time to Set Me Up," this one is the quote-unquote phone caper. At the end of the video, a police cruiser pulls up erratically after seeing a individual on a bicycle, and the person on the bicycle turns to try to escape, and the police officer gets out in pursuit, which he ultimately ties back to him in some way. And for me, it is exactly what I think it is, and that's just a police officer chasing a suspect.
In the descriptions, he believes it was staged because Lang himself rides a bike in the morning routinely, so the cops, knowing this information, would see him on his morning bike ride and have probable cause to stop him, since he fits the description, in order to get a search warrant for an apparent missing phone that would have been planted on him. From my tone, I think you can understand how I feel about that one. Anyway, quoted from his channel, "Fresno cops would have planted a treasure trove of items that would ensure my silence for a very long, long time."
Yeah, so this brings me back to the delusion disorder, which based on this video, I can see why this disorder has been applied to his behavior. In this specific instance, it is the persecutory delusional disorder. And people with this type of delusional disorder believe that they or someone close to them are being mistreated, or that someone is spying on them or planning to harm them. It is not uncommon for people with this type of delusional disorder to make repeated complaints to legal authorities. So it seems to fit possibly there.
Yeah, and to be noted, to reiterate what we said before, the only reason we discuss any of these disorders is not because we believe they're there, as much as a lot of the resources we find online imply or even outright state that they think it's there. So we're just trying to cover the discussion about it, not make you not trying to diagnose them in any way. However, there certainly is a strong element of paranoia. Some of it might be justified, but certain videos on his channel seem, in my opinion, like a search. And by that I mean that they're not looked at objectively as much as maybe Lang was trying to find some meaning in them. And if you decide that every single thing is a sign, nothing will ever be a coincidence. That mindset is dangerous. In some of the videos, I don't even know what to look for. I had to watch videos multiple times in order to even see what apparently was off or scary or a sign.
Yeah, there was one video where he claims his dog was being groomed by Fresno law enforcement, but all I saw was a man walking his dog and then stopping at Lang's front gate where Lang's dog was. And it seemed like an ordinary encounter. Basically, it's like this guy's walking his dog, they stop, the dogs kind of sniff each other, and then he walks away. There are also videos that I thought were kind of strange as well, though. The video entitled Thermal Imaging Threat and Intimidation by Fresno Law Enforcement. This one was one I couldn't really explain away as something everyday.
Yeah, so the description of the video says, "This is the same Fresno, California sheriff crew that has been illegally entering my property and home when I leave my house. Here they are using an infrared thermal imager to see if I'm home. Then they then phone a waiting second party with information as to whether or not I am home. Fresno PD fails to fully investigate my complaint on this incident, which I fully detailed in my Fresno PD internal affairs complaint."
Yeah, so a black van opens up its doors, and there is a man holding a camera, and it is assumed by Lang to be thermal, but I question why they open up the doors and automatically the camera's facing Lang's home. It isn't easy to explain, at least for me. I just find it strange, and I can see how that feeds his paranoia. What do you think?
To me, it looked like a camera rig, but on top of that, what I do think is suspicious is that any kind of van opening its doors and pointing its camera, whether it's thermal imaging or just a camera, and points it to your house, that in itself is not normal. That's not something that happens every day, and anyone would be concerned about that because they're like, what the fuck are they looking for?
Right.
However, if someone already is paranoid and has convinced themselves that it is the police, if I were in his shoes, I would be very afraid because it's clear that they almost don't care about being open, because opening a van and having you, and if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see the footage here of what happens, but just opening a van and just being okay with having whoever in the house or Lang seeing you filming, that's not just creepy and scary, but that shows that they don't feel intimidated by you at all. Like, they don't give a fuck if you see. And that's what's scary.
It's like a ultimate power move to show,
yeah,
fear of force. So I did look up the infrared camera that he mentioned in his YouTube description, and it does not look, the camera that the person in the van has does not look like the photo, but that's probably because the rig you mentioned, so we can't rule it out. The one I saw was kind of just like a handheld, small type of camera that was like bright yellow, so I'm sure it could have been a different version, so I'm not sure. Can't rule it out, and you can't definitively say it's that camera either. There's also another video which a lot of people cite, and it is where the police officers are hanging out outside his house, which I find strange. They're out of their police cruisers just hanging around. And I saw on a Reddit thread a man claiming to be his neighbor, saying Lang was not well liked because he would always be capturing his neighbor's activity on cameras, so the neighbors would call the cops on him. Whether that's true or not, I think the fact that the police are there and don't seem to confront him about these alleged calls is not normal police behavior. There's definitely, at least for me, enough evidence on his YouTube channel to say that his paranoia is not without merit. So calling him delusional, I think it might be a bit unfair at this point. It's really hard to say. What do you think?
I definitely think that he displays a lot of paranoia, but like you said, it's not without reason. Some of the videos on his channel I watch and it just looks like I'm seeing footage of cars going down a street. And in those moments, I'm like, okay, like it's just cars going down the street. But on the other hand, like we just said with your example of the cops just standing around, if there are complaints from neighbors, wouldn't they go and be like, Lang, we've talked about this, stop filming,
exactly,
whatever.
Like no confrontation whatsoever.
So like what I'm wondering, and this goes also for the thermal imaging camera rig situation, is that it's a confrontation without confrontation. So it goes back to like what he said, the intimidation, the fact that they're just standing there and the fact that they're filming there. They're not there to resolve any problems. They're there to say, we are watching you.
Right. Yeah, and I question Fresno law enforcement. They're aware of Lang's existence and his police activism. They've been called out by him. So wouldn't they think it's a bad idea to hang out outside his house? Right. Like, let's just stay away from him. Let's not cause any more controversy where there isn't any. And yet we have videos where they're hanging out outside his house. It's strange.
Yeah, I was actually going to make a comment about that because when I was watching the footage, I was thinking, if they really want to plant evidence, like if they really, really want to fuck with Lang, they should be invisible. He should have no idea that they're there, right?
Right.
So then part of me is like, oh, well, maybe the reason he knows that they're there is because he has cameras. So of course it's hard to be invisible if there's all these cameras. But at the same time, they're being so bold about it that I'm questioning, are they trying to fuel this fire? Like, are they trying to get themselves talked about? Because like you said, the smartest thing would be to A, fuck off, just like not talk to Lang unless like there are police complaints, and even then maybe wear like a dash cam so anytime they interact with him they
Right.
can, you know, like show that the interaction is completely legal. But aside from that, otherwise there would be no reason ever to confront someone like that, because if he is delusional or if he is overly paranoid, any confrontation, I'm certain any confrontation, even a normal one, he would take it to mean something else.
Absolutely.
So why are they there is the question, because they're being so open and that's giving him more fuel. Like he
Yeah.
would probably stop talking if they just stopped showing up.
Right. And we bring up the neighbor that he mentioned on his Facebook page, and citing the neighbor from the Reddit thread claiming the neighbors didn't like him. It puts credence into that Facebook post saying the Fresno PD and my neighbor are going to be involved in this.
Yeah. And I saw a Reddit post, though, like, I don't want to put too much credibility in this Reddit post because there's no confirmation of identity. But this person claimed to be a neighbor, like, on the back side. Like, there was, like, an alleyway between his house and the back
I
of...
think that's the same guy.
And, well, in this post that I saw, maybe it's a different post, the neighbor claims that they were, like, 10 years old when they were, like, when they were aware of this situation, and just remember their parents saying that he was not well liked and that he was mentally ill.
Right.
So-
Yeah, not something. I heard that neighbors said he was always off.
Yeah. And, you know, the fact that this person is potentially 10 years old also brings in a little bit of trouble in terms of giving them proper credit. You know, when you're 10, you might not really understand what
Right.
it is your parents are telling you about someone. But it is important to just keep that in mind, and you can consider whether you want to believe that part or not.
Yeah, and we're constantly fighting that battle with this case is paranoia, but the situation's feeding his paranoia. I go back and forth. But we should move on to the coroner's report, because this is where, for me, it gets even more controversial.
Yeah, 100%. So I saw a lot of information online, or should I say misinformation online, about the coroner's report. Now, the coroner's report, I think when this misinformation started, was not yet published, and hence why it gained a certain amount of attention, because it turns out that Lang was stabbed, right? However, online, people were like, he was stabbed in the back, and this is being called a suicide attempt, which obviously, if you're stabbed in the back, it would be very hard for you
Right.
to do that unless you work at the fucking circus and are a contortionist. So, when we look, though, at the actual coroner's report, all stab wounds go from front to back. So he was not stabbed in the back.
Right. He was stabbed 3 times in the chest, is what it stated. But Fresno police originally reported that John Lang, 51, had been stabbed in his abdomen and upper back. So Tony Body, a spokesman for the Fresno County Sheriff and Coroner, said that Lang had 3 superficial self-inflicted stab wounds to his chest, no cuts on his back, despite these initial reports. And I've heard it said by Lieutenant Burke Farah that Lieutenant Joe Gomez, the public information officer, misspoke when he talked about the stab wounds in the back. So, of course, people are suspicious of that. And it just Fresno law enforcement, if they're innocent,
Are really
certainly-
good at looking guilty.
Yeah, seriously. So the coroner's report determined the cause of death wasn't even the stab wounds. It was the inhalation of smoke and soot, with multiple stab wounds as a contributing factor.
Yeah, and just a quick side note on that. If you are watching on YouTube, we have a link where you can download the actual PDF of the coroner's report so you can read through it if you want to. So in the coroner's report, obviously they detail the 3 different stab wounds. All of the stab wounds were from front to back, though some were slightly tilting to the left or downwards, but all of them were from front to back. Now, what I wonder here, and I don't mean to be conspiratorial or anything, but all of them are from the front to back. Some of them tilt in a direction or the other, and then there's one that's downward. Now, I want to specifically mention the one that's downward because if we're hypothetically speaking about this here, if I were to take a knife and stab myself, it would be very difficult for me to stab myself straight because, like, when you hold a knife to yourself, especially right here in your chest area, because one of the stab wounds went through the ventricles, so that would be directly. I don't know how you would be able to do that easily. It would, to me anyway, as a lay person, right, that a stab would be straight rather than angled downwards. Because if you're holding a knife, whether you're right or left-handed, holding it straight towards you with enough force to stab through, unless you do it extremely slowly, it has to be angled downwards, right?
Right. That would make sense.
So the 2 others are not angled downwards, which I thought was strange, and that doesn't mean that someone else did it necessarily, or that's what I believe. I just thought that was a little bit weird.
Yeah, plus I think downward does not suggest whether it was suicide or homicide, because the person could have been taller and stabbing downwards, kind of like, that Psycho scene where, exactly. Like, that could have caused the downward thrust. And the other 2 stab wounds were horizontal, I think with slight angular impressions. It was said that 2 knives were taken as evidence. One was a Japanese knife that was deemed too small, and then the 3rd serrated bread knife was quoted on saying that this could have caused all 3 stab wounds, therefore it was attributed to all those stab wounds. So there were 3 stab wounds. One perforated the chest wall, and as you said, hit the right ventricle of the heart. And there's rib fractures, a collapsed lung, and yet the sheriff said that the wounds were superficial. That does not line up.
No.
Like, superficial for me means just the skin, didn't penetrate anything, didn't go beyond the flesh or bone.
And couldn't also potentially kill you, right?
Right, like a stab in the heart. I don't understand how they can rule the cause of death a suicide, citing inhalation of smoke and soot, when there's 3 stab wounds that obviously could, cause death.
Right. Yeah, and honestly, if we talk about this as just general people, not looking at it in a medical way, but just generally, in the past, how many suicides have we seen of people stabbing themselves in the chest? Like, I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm just saying I've not heard of any suicide like that, and maybe there are some.
There's Elliot Smith was said to have stabbed himself in the heart 2 times, but that's a controversy in itself, So
even just looking at it with just a basic cynical lens, if he wanted to kill himself, he has a carport. There's a mention of a carport. You lock yourself in the carport.
Right.
You turn on your car. There's so many other ways in which this could have happened that would have been more direct. In the coroner's report, they also find that he is sober. He has no drugs in his system.
I saw that.
Which, I'm like, if you really want to make sure that you're going to die, you're going to light your house on fire, you're going to stab yourself and just hope for the best?
Yeah, I mean, it's very strange. And, I can see why people are calling this is murder. And as he's a police accountability activist, maybe he thought this death, framing his death as a homicide, would bring about an investigation into the Fresno Police Department. So people cite there's motive.
Right.
So once again, you flip-flop between there's no way he could have done this and there's motive. So what I find strange is that the coroner's report in opinion, or my opinions, it just says one sentence. Opinion. From the autopsy's findings and present investigation, it is my opinion the manner of death is suicide. It gives no elaboration. It doesn't talk about the angles from the knife. It doesn't talk about blood found on the knife. It doesn't talk about any examination done on the knife. I'm sure that might be in police records, but I could not find them. And when a coroner gets cross-examined, say in a homicide trial, you would expect to see some substantiated evidence to give that opinion. And I think it's extremely negligent to assume this is suicide when apparently he was barricaded inside his house, making it difficult for firefighters to reach him. The fire was at the front of the house, and his body was found in the back. So I just think it's extremely negligent to just say it's a suicide, not even maybe an accidental death, considering the fire was the cause of the death, the inhalation of the smoke. It's too absolute for me. It leaves no room for
ambiguity.
Thank you. So this is what this case is. It's ambiguous.
Well, I think, honestly, if we look at this from the standpoint of like an average person like me or you, just looking at this case with what we've discussed so far, you have a guy who, delusional or paranoid, whatever, we still have a guy who's actively posting about the police and their supposed illegal activity and negligence, right? If I were the Fresno PD in this specific case, I would go above and beyond to find what happened, because as there's already this kind of conspiracy around this man and what he thinks is happening, if they just rule it the way they did, a suicide because of inhaling soot and like smoke, and then just saying, yeah, it was a suicide, that makes you look even worse because it looks like you're hiding something.
Yeah.
So had they just even gone the extra mile to say it is an ambiguous death, or it could be a suicide, however, because of these factors, it could be a murder, to just be open to it rather than calling it case closed, that makes them look bad. So I just don't understand any of the choices they made in this whole thing, even in like a PR way.
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't see how he set fire to his home. What did he use to start the fire in his home? And apparently, police cited that before he turned off his cameras, of course the cameras got turned off, he was holding a knife in the footage. But where's that footage? It's just all just assumed to have existed, at least by people who believe that he was paranoid and then maybe he did do this to himself, but there's no evidence. No evidence to suggest that he did this to himself.
Right.
It's not absolute.
No, it's not. And even if there were evidence with him holding a knife, like that still doesn't necessarily mean anything, you know? Like you can take a snapshot of pretty much anything, take it out of context, and all of a sudden it looks bad. Yeah, but like maybe he was cutting his chicken for dinner and someone rang the doorbell. He goes outside still holding the knife. Like, you know what I mean? It's just kind of like saying, oh, he was holding a knife. That sounds bad.
Yeah,
it's
but like
context.
It's the fact that the footage, they say it existed, but it where's the proof that it existed? Why wouldn't they show that to at least substantiate their claims that here he is holding the knife. That's the knife that was used on his body. Therefore, it could be suggested that this is a suicide.
Right.
You know, I would love to see the police documents on what was done during this investigation, but I don't think we will. And I want to note that the Fresno Police Department does have a history of corruption and police brutality. I'm not going to get into it because I think that's a podcast episode on its own, but you know, it doesn't look good for the Fresno Police Department.
Honestly, my main thing that I'm left questioning, and the question that keeps coming back up in my head, is, let's say the police was doing everything that Lang claimed. In a hypothetical world, they're doing everything he claimed. Anyone of higher up who is not corrupt would be very concerned at having a citizen being like, hey, your police is doing so, and so. So what is strange to me is also that if I worked in the Fresno PD and I were one of the people who wasn't corrupt, you'd kind of want to bring that to someone's attention so you can get it taken care of, right? You wouldn't just let someone keep going, keep posting this footage, keep potentially slandering. If it's not true, it would have been slander, right? So it's just kind of in either way, whether there was corruption or not, it seems strange to me that no police ever reached out in a formal manner, even having him come to the police department so they can film him and film the conversation they have to kind of get some clarity on what the fuck is going on.
Right. I mean, at least in internal affairs documentation saying, hey, we looked into what you said and we couldn't conclude anything, but obviously people would claim IA corruption.
Right.
It's just a confusing case. Even if he did commit suicide, I think the investigation seems like they didn't do due diligence to conclude this. You know, it seems a lot of conjecture was, about his paranoia and delusions led them to this idea that he committed suicide. But I think that's a good place to stop, and I recommend listeners to watch the YouTube, look up articles, look at the coroner's report, and formulate your own opinion. It is split. There are people that think this is absolute murder, and there are many people who believe this is someone who was delusional and paranoid and was trying to frame the police. So if you want, send us an email and we can maybe update or give additional findings in a later episode.
Thank you guys for tuning into this episode. If you are watching and listening along on YouTube, feel free to leave a comment down below. If you guys are listening on any other platform that is not YouTube, remember that you can message us on our Instagram. That's Mephisto's Corner. You can send us a DM with your opinion, comments, whatever. If not, you can also email us, and that's mephistoscorner@gmail.com.
All right. Keep it strange, people. See you next time.